In 2700 BC, a Sumerian king named Ziusudra was warned by the gods that a great flood was coming. He was told to build a boat, to take his family, to survive. He did. And the world was destroyed, and he alone carried the memory of what came before. You've heard this story before. You know this story. But here's what nobody tells you. Ziusudra's story was written down 1,000 years before the book of Genesis, and the Sumerians weren't alone. The Babylonians had the same story. The Greeks had the same story. The Hindus, the Maya, the Aztecs, the Aboriginal Australians, the Chinese, the Norse. Over 200 independent flood myths exist across cultures that had absolutely no contact with each other. 200. The question isn't why so many cultures invented a flood story. The question is, why does every culture on Earth remember one? Let's establish the scope of what we're actually dealing with here. Because this isn't a case of a few similar stories that scholars have exaggerated into a pattern. The overlap is specific, consistent, and deeply strange. The oldest written flood myth comes from ancient Sumer, modern-day Iraq. The Epic of Gilgamesh, written around 2100 BC, tells the story of Utnapishtim, a man chosen by the gods to survive a catastrophic deluge. He builds a massive boat. He takes animals aboard. The flood lasts 7 days. A dove is released to find dry land. He eventually lands on a mountaintop. Sound familiar? The biblical flood of Noah was written centuries after Gilgamesh. Many scholars believe the stories share a common source, possibly a much older oral tradition neither culture invented, but both inherited. In the Hindu tradition, the god Vishnu appears to the sage Manu as a small fish. He warns Manu of an apocalyptic flood. He tells him to build a ship and fill it with the seeds of every living thing. The flood comes. Manu survives. He repopulates the earth. Across the Atlantic, the Maya recorded in the Popol Vuh that the gods had already destroyed humanity multiple times with floods before creating the current human race. The Aztec calendar describes 5 successive worlds, 4 of which ended in catastrophe. One of them drowned. In Aboriginal Australian tradition, stories describe a time when the sea rose and swallowed the coastline. Stories we'll return to later because they contain something extraordinary. Greece, China, Scandinavia, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Pacific Islands, the Americas. The pattern doesn't care about geography. It doesn't care about religion. It doesn't care about the century. Every human civilization on every continent looked back into the deep past and remembered water. What makes this truly unsettling isn't just that the stories exist everywhere, it's that they share the same specific details. Researchers who have studied comparative flood mythology have identified a core set of elements that appear across virtually every version of the story, regardless of culture. 1. A divine warning. In almost every version, the flood is not a surprise. A god, a spirit, or a supernatural being warns a single chosen individual that the catastrophe is coming. 2. A chosen survivor. Always one person or one family, not a community, not a nation. 1. 3. A vessel. The survivor is told to build something, a boat, a raft, a great ship, and to use it to escape. 4. Animals. In a striking number of versions, the survivor is told to bring animals aboard, not just food, animals, as if the purpose is preservation of species, not just survival of humans. 5. A mountaintop landing. After the waters recede, the vessel comes to rest on high ground, a mountain, always a mountain. 6. A bird as scout. In multiple independent traditions, Sumerian, Hebrew, Hindu, Greek, a bird is released to test whether land has appeared. A dove, a raven, a swallow. These aren't vague similarities. These are structural, specific, the kind of detail that doesn't spontaneously appear in unrelated stories told by people who had never met. So what happened? There are several serious explanations, and here's what's interesting. They're not mutually exclusive. Theory 1. It really happened, many times. Around 10,000 BC, the last ice age ended. The great ice sheets that covered much of North America and Northern Europe began melting. Over the following millennia, global sea levels rose by an estimated 120 meters. Let that number settle for a moment. 120 meters. Entire coastlines vanished. Land bridges that connected continents disappeared. Shallow seas swallowed the edges of every continent on Earth. This wasn't a single event. It was a slow catastrophe that played out over thousands of years, punctuated by sudden, violent episodes when ice dams broke and billions of gallons of meltwater flooded into the oceans almost overnight. In 1996, geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman published evidence that the Black Sea, now a saltwater body, was once a freshwater lake. Around 5,600 BC, the natural dam separating it from the Mediterranean gave way. The resulting flood was catastrophic, filling the basin at a rate many times faster than Niagara Falls. Hundreds of thousands of people living along the shores would have had to flee. Ryan and Pittman proposed this was the source of the flood myths of the ancient Near East. Many scholars disagree, but the event itself, the flood, is no longer in dispute. What if the answer is even simpler than a single source? What if these stories exist everywhere because catastrophic flooding happened everywhere, repeatedly, and every surviving culture remembered it? Theory 2. Oral memory is older and more accurate than we think. In 2015, a group of researchers published a study examining Aboriginal Australian stories that described landscapes now submerged beneath the sea, bays, islands and coastlines that geologists confirmed disappeared between 7,000 and 18,000 years ago. The stories were accurate, geographically accurate, to places that had been underwater for up to 18,000 years. If oral traditions can preserve accurate geographic memory across that time span, then stories of catastrophic flooding passed down from survivors of the post-ice age sea level rise could easily be 10,000 years old and still contain real information. Theory 3. The flood is astronomical. A minority of researchers, including some serious scholars, have proposed that at least some flood myths aren't memories of water at all, but encoded descriptions of astronomical events. Certain configurations of stars and planets recurring on long cycles were described by ancient astronomers using the language of catastrophe and flood. This is more contested, but it points to something important. The people who created these stories were sophisticated observers of the sky, and not everything they recorded was literal. Here's where I want to leave you. The mainstream academic position is that flood myths are either coincidental, humans everywhere feared water, so everywhere humans invented flood stories, or that they spread through cultural contact, the same story traveling along trade routes and borrowing details as it went. Both explanations have merit. Neither fully accounts for the evidence, because the pattern is too specific, too structural, too consistent across cultures that genuinely had no contact with each other. The specific detail of the bird, the mountaintop, the chosen survivor, the animals. These details don't diffuse randomly across the world like a rumor. They appear independently in the stories of people separated by oceans and millennia. What we may be looking at is something extraordinary, a genuine memory, a real event or series of events, so catastrophic that every surviving human community encoded the experience into their deepest stories and passed it forward across hundreds of generations. The flood didn't just shape the ancient world. It shaped the stories we still tell today. It shaped our religions, our cosmologies, our understanding of what the gods expect of us. And we have almost certainly forgotten most of what was lost when the waters came. This is sacred and strange. Every episode, we go deeper into the stories humanity has been telling since before history began. and we ask what they might actually mean. Next time, we're looking at something equally strange: the dying and rising god. A deity who is killed and returns from the dead appears independently in Egyptian mythology, Greek mythology, and Sumerian mythology, centuries before Christianity. Same story, different names, different continents. Why? We'll find out. If this is the kind of question that keeps you up at night, subscribe. New episodes every week.